Hey guys, it's Mike from Make Time Online, and today we're looking at exactly why and how to start a podcast that will grow your brand and business. So this podcast today is just going to be me. It's going to have to be stuck with me today. And there's going to be kind of like three main parts to it. Part one, it's just looking at some of the stats and things, which when you just hear these stats, it seriously blows your mind. So that's just part one. Part two is basically why you can start a podcast. Like why does anyone do a podcast? What's the point? Like what do you get out of it, sort of thing? And what I've personally got out of doing a podcast. And part three is then also just how to actually start a podcast. You'll be amazed actually at how simple it actually is to start a podcast. Not that my podcast sounds like NPR, like super professional or anything like that, but you can do it kind of anywhere with very, very minimal tools. You'll be amazed. You can also head over to the show notes at maketimeonline.com/58. If you want to pick up like just some of the tools and things that I mentioned in the podcast, there's also a couple of YouTube videos in there, which are super useful, just so you can actually see how to do certain things. So I hope you enjoy it, guys. So anyway, part one is just some of the mind-boggling stats, I would say, like compared to anything else that's out there right now to kind of like grow your brand, business, and whatever content it is that you're producing, just have a listen to some of these stats and just have a think about where do you think it might be a good idea to go. So there are 1.7 billion websites in the world at the moment. So this is in 2019, sorry. It's the start of 2019. This was the most up-to-date stats I could get. There were 600 million blogs. So like 600 million like individual people that are writing a blog kind of thing. So not just any website. And there are 31 million YouTube channels. So this was all at the start of 2019. These were January 2019. At the start of January 2020, there were 850,000 podcasts in existence. So just compare that. 600 million blogs, 31 million YouTube channels, 850,000 podcasts. So there's not even a million podcasts at the start of 2020. I think we actually did just surpass that number. We just went past 1 million quite recently, actually. So again, that can kind of show you the speed and scale of like how many of the growth and things, like how many people are starting podcasts like right now. And here are some like amazing stats, which I had no idea about, to be honest, just on like listener levels. So there were loads of quite interesting things. Like I actually found out the different places that actually listen to podcasts. So like obviously different parts of the world have a different interest. For some reason, South Korea is like 60%. This was in 2018. Whereas United Kingdom, it's 18%. So 58%, 18%. And then you've got loads of different countries with different listener levels. But the US is obviously probably like, it may or may not be your main audience. You know, like Australia's 33%, Spain's 40%. It depends obviously where you are in the world, but the US is quite often where people like talk about, and obviously they've got such a huge population, that it was quite interesting to see theirs anyway. So I found in 2014, 15% of the US population were listening to a podcast monthly. So they were there were people listening to it every month, not the total number of people that have ever listened to it. That is 41 million people in the US. In 2020, 37% of the US population are listening to podcasts monthly. So that is a jump from 41 million to 104 million in 6 years. There is no other platform out there that has had that kind of growth of just people that are becoming aware of a certain type of thing that anyone can start from home. And I hear this is one of the big things I hear about blogging and things like that, or quite a lot. And it's a valid reason, is that it's not really, people can't you can't really stand out anymore. You know, it's oversaturated. There's so many people doing it. Anyone can build a website, blah, 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 blah. The thing is though, really not everyone does it. And, you know, in those numbers, 600 million blogs or whatever it was at the moment, not lots of people that have a blog have 2 or 3 or 4, you know, or have created different ones over the years. They might not even still like all be going like and being active with them. So you kind of have to take those numbers with a pinch of salt. And I wouldn't say that just because of those numbers for like blogging and things like that is that you shouldn't do that, because anyone that I know with podcasts, they all send people to a website, including myself. Like that's you know, your website's almost like your base, your home and things like that. It's just what I'm pointing out here is the opportunity that currently exists with podcasts and how it is so easy. Like if you're creating content already, you're already putting the time and effort and resources into researching, writing. Maybe you're doing YouTube. If you're doing YouTube, it's even easier. You literally just use your YouTube audio and stick it on a podcast. It's like no extra work. Literally no extra work other than dragging a file onto your podcast hosting. Anyway, that's kind of like part one, just to give you an overview as to why I think this really could be something big at the moment. Like if you're looking for a way to kind of like stand out and make your brand, your business, your content just have a different edge, a different appeal. I'm just going to share with you some of the reasons why I started and also why I think it's a really good idea to get into podcasting. Now, I'm going to start with this. Like it doesn't mean it is for everyone. I'm going to put that across straight away. Like it's the same with blogging, it's the same with YouTube. I'm not going to recommend everyone do this, you know. So if you're listening to this and going, oh, but I have so many things on the go at the moment. Like even for myself, I know I want to start a YouTube channel. I already kind of have like some stuff that have been going on a YouTube channel, but I just haven't put any serious time and thought. And it's like, oh, it's another thing that you need to do. So I get that completely, but I'm just sharing with you what I see as 7 main benefits of having a podcast. So number 1, the big one for me, is to connect with leaders in your industry. Some of the people that I have spoken to, I would never in a million years, like I am a nobody. When I started the podcast in January 2019, I literally I just started a website, you know, like 3 months before it or something like that. I think it was in September 2018. And I was getting, not like instantly, but I've had multiple 7-figure online business owners, like per year, people that make $1 million or more a year. I've had multiple people of them on the podcast that I have had a one-to-one chat with for like an hour. If I was to reach out to those people and say, hey, do you fancy having a chat with me for an hour so I can pick your brains and ask you anything that I want to ask you? They're not going to say yes. They're not even going to respond to an email if I just reach out to someone like that. And it's just that for me is without a doubt the number one best reason. Obviously, depending on what it is that you're writing about or whatever content you're putting out, it could be slightly different, but it's a great way for you to actually connect with other people in your industry, in your actual like business, in your niche, whatever it is, and just build up some really strong relationships. And those relationships in business you hear it all the time. You don't need to hear it from me. Read any business book. It comes up. You're like, your network is your net worth. Number 2 is that it helps you to actually learn more about a topic, which obviously like a lot of people kind of see it as if you're starting a podcast, you should know that topic. You know, that is what your topic is on. So why are you wanting to learn more about it? Now, I'll give you a couple of examples. I've actually interviewed Tej from Tej Talks back in the UK on my podcast before, like when I was like starting the podcast and I didn't really have a clue what I was doing. I interviewed him, and that is basically what he did. He just started a podcast in the UK all about a property. And I've been like involved with property investing and things like that. So I sort of had this like little network of people that I could reach out to and speak to and stuff about that sort of stuff. but he hadn't even bought a house. He hadn't even really, he'd been considering it, but he didn't really have the funds. He didn't have any knowledge. He had no idea what to do. So what he did is he just started asking people, hey, do you want to have a chat about investing in property in the UK? And again, like ended up having some amazing people on his podcast, and he's learned so much. And now he's like this authority in his field, which is number 3, become an authority in your field. And that is something that you can do just by putting a regular podcast out there. And what it does as well is, it's not only that you become an authority, you build up a real relationship with people in your industry. Because if they're listening to you every week, like you right now, you might be out for a walk, at the gym, in the car, shopping, cooking. I am in your earbuds, me, Mike Beattie, some random guy from the UK. I am speaking to you directly right now, and I am sitting in our second bedroom. I'm just in my bedroom looking out, like, you know, I could literally be anywhere in the world. I am basically nobody, and I'm having a huge influence on you right now, whether you like it or not, or whether you believe it or not. That's what's going on. And that is what can happen. Like, obviously it doesn't just happen from day one. You're not just going to start doing it, but I always try and be completely honest. Well, no, I am always completely honest, open. I will answer anything that anyone asks me, and I never try and hide anything that I am trying to do. And I just think if you can do that and be, you know, just that ethical business model, just being open, honest, and upfront about everything that you are actually trying to achieve, then you can actually build real relationships with people and become an authority in that field. Not saying that I am an authority in the whole online business world or anything like that, but it is what starts to happen just naturally. Like anyone that, you know, if someone has no idea about any of this stuff, they come onto my website, they see I've got a podcast, they listen to a couple, and they're like, oh my God, yeah, look, this guy is like talking to multi-million pound dollar bloggers and stuff like that, and people that are doing some cool stuff, and he seems to know his things. And I've just built authority just by having a podcast. And all I did is just have a chat with a few people. And then obviously I'm learning stuff. Remember, part number 2. Anyway, number 4 is that it creates new opportunities that you hadn't even thought of. So there's honestly been a lot of people that have emailed me just asking if they can come on the podcast or certain different things and, you know, random stuff that people end up emailing you. Like, for example, I think I got asked to speak at something in America, and I was like, well, you know, like if they could pay for the flight and all that sort of stuff, then yeah, I'll be there. But it just opens the door to so many new possible things that you wouldn't have necessarily have thought of. Like, as in, there are legit people whose job it is for whoever they're working with. There might be a solopreneur or entrepreneur, you know, whatever, that actually go on to iTunes, look through the categories, try and find related podcasts, and then cold outreach email and reach out to them. And to be honest, I reject most of them because, like, if I haven't heard of them or if I haven't seen them before, I'll always just do a quick background check and see if it might be related. But quite often they're just not the right sort of person that I want. You know, I want real people. I don't want these like big businesses and people, you know. I've actually had chats before where I haven't even released the podcast. I've had a few of them, and I've just thought, you know what, it's not been quite right. And then I'll let them know, and I'm like, sorry, can't do it. But anyway, it creates new opportunities that you might not have even thought of existing. Number 5 is that you get free stuff. Not always, and it won't happen with every niche and or every industry, obviously, but if you are building these relationships with people and they've like created courses, or maybe they've got a product, you know, like if you're talking about training dogs and you're getting like these dog trainers on there or something, I don't know, I'm just making this up. But if you get that sort of thing, then you can get their courses, or maybe they've got some products or something that they will quite often just send you as like a giveaway, but also then you actually try their stuff, and if you like it, then you end up promoting it as well. You know, it's kind of like they're not really losing anything, but you can gain loads of knowledge and stuff. anyway, that's number 5. Number 6 is the increase in traffic. Now, I want to make this really clear. You should not start a podcast to get more traffic to your website, because that's silly. It may happen kind of naturally, but something that is very, very hard to do is actually like track traffic that you're getting from your podcast or anything like that. It's not like you can see them go from iTunes on their phone to then checking out your podcast. It's just that I've noticed I'm getting more and more direct. So if you go into Google Analytics, you've got like social, organic, direct, referral. But directs is basically if someone just goes onto the website and types in your website. And I'm noticing that starting to happen. Now, it could just be maybe someone's seen my website or whatever and typed it in themselves and then just remembered, oh yeah, I'm going to check that out because I found that was useful. So I'm going to do that. But I'm guessing a large chunk of that is actually really my second main traffic stream for Make Time Online now. The main is organic and then second is direct. And I'm guessing a lot of that is coming from podcasts where, like, even at the end of this, I'm going to tell you, go and check out the show notes because, I'll give you, I'm going to show you how you can actually start the podcast basically. So that is something that can also happen, which just means, again, you kind of interlinking all of your content ideas. So if you've already got a blog, it's actually might not be that much effort. We'll get onto that anyway. And then number 7, well, this is kind of part of it. It's easy to create. It is so easy to create that I think people really don't understand how easy it is to actually create a podcast. I'm literally just speaking into a microphone that's plugged into my laptop right now on a free platform called Audacity, which we're going to get to soon. And it's just recording it. I do minimal tweaks to it and then I release it. I stick it on a hosting platform. Yes, I've done research and stuff into this. And in fact, I've actually done a guest post for this exact topic. And that's actually kind of what I'm using quite a lot right now. I'm referring to, which I'll also show you in the show notes. I can link you over to it. There's hardly anything that you could literally, if you already know a whole heap about a certain topic, you can just talk off the top of your head. Obviously, some people like to really make sure everything is like really laid out and they're going to have almost like a script they're going to talk about. But it's personal preference at the end of the day. You probably can talk about a certain topic for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, and get something across. Well, I've just realized this has been 17 and a half minutes. Anyway, so I'm going to get on to how to actually start a podcast and just give you an idea as well, is that they don't all have to be, if you're listening to this, I'm sure you've listened to other podcasts before. If you're listening to my podcast, you almost definitely have listened to other ones before, and you'll see different people have a very different style. But it's really, they all fall under 2 main types, and it's solo or interview. And obviously this is a solo podcast I'm doing right now, whereas regularly I will do an interview style. But there's also other ones such as like multi-hosts, where you might have different hosts that come on at different times, or you might have, 2 hosts that host it. You might have a round table where they have a group of regular guests that they kind of get on. It's basically so many different ways of doing it, and it's completely personal preference, and also depends on like your industry and who you're serving basically. So there isn't really a right or wrong answer as to like what's better, but yeah, you can mix it up. Like that's, as you've probably noticed from my podcast, I will do these occasional solo ones where I feel like there's something really important that I feel like I can add value to people. Quite often it is just from having chats with other people. Funny enough, like I'll learn something from other people and I'll be like, oh yeah, that was really, really good. But it was in the middle of a 1 hour chat with this person and it could easily get lost. The message could get lost. And now I know about this. Now I'm going to share it. That's kind of the way that I do it anyway. But, like I say, if you want to find out more about this, so there is more on this. So there's things about like how to actually find experts in your industry, how to actually get in contact with them, reach out to them and get them on the podcast, how to ask them, all that sort of outreach. And I've even got like a little template and examples of stuff that I've done. The spoiler alert is that I don't recommend ever cold outreaching people if you can avoid it. Obviously, you at some stage, you probably will have to put a message out there, which is technically cold outreach. But the best way always is to actually build a bit of relationship, learn what they're actually doing, and try and help them. They're all real people at the end of the day. So if you can actually help them, I think most guests I've had on my podcast at some stage has either been like I've seen them in Facebook groups or something like that, and I've helped to pin their stuff, share their things, understand what they're actually doing, and then saying, look, do you want to have a chat and we can talk more about it or whatever. That's something. If you actually reach out to people like that, there's so much more detail into that in the show notes. Well, I'll link to the guest post that I did on breaking the 1%, which is Jeff and Ben, who's been on the podcast before. They made I think when I chatted to them, they were making like $240,000 in a month from their personal finance website. So those two really know what they're talking about. Again, this links back to, building those relationships and things like that. I've got a guest post, which helps your domain authority. It's getting backlinked to my website. And probably I would never have been able to get one on their website if I didn't have this relationship already built from them from like over an hour chat with them. So it's kind of all interlinked. You can see how this whole topic is kind of interlinked. Anyway, how to start a podcast, part 3. This part is definitely going to be one of those things that's much easier to see visually. So this is why, like I say, I will link you to the show notes. But there's actually not that much that you need to do to start a podcast. In fact, you don't actually need to spend a penny. Honestly, you don't need to spend a penny to actually get a podcast out there. That sounds good as well. It's not even like some terrible sounding audio. There's so much free stuff now online that it's ridiculous. It really is. But there's only 3 main steps. Number 1, choose your podcast hosting. So like your website hosting, similar thing. Number 2, record and edit your podcast. And then number 3, publish and connect your hosting to different podcast directories. So like Apple, Spotify, so many different ones that there are, but it's all there in the show notes. Like I'll explain all of this. So just the main tools that you actually need to set up the podcast. So like I say, the hosting is the main thing. Now, when I wrote this guest post, and I still currently actually use a hosting platform called PodBing, which was, when I started the podcast, it was definitely the most affordable one that was out there with unlimited amounts of hosting, because there are some platforms such as like Anchor, but they are like very limited to what you actually can do. And there's only so much that you can actually record for free and things like that. And then there are just different services that each hosting provides. But I will put a really cool video actually in the show notes as well of Pete McPherson, who's going to come on the podcast next week, explaining all of the different hosting platforms. And it is 100% just easier to actually see this than just listening to me ramble on, because I'm just going to be saying words, if you know what I mean. But PodBean is about $108 for the year with an unlimited upload plan. Lisbon is one that gets recommended quite a lot, but it's $5 a month for only 50 megabytes. And just to give you an example, like a 45-minute podcast for me is about 45 megabytes. So that is one podcast a month that I could put out if I was to use something like Lisbon at $5 a month. There are more expensive plans like $15 a month. But here's the really cool thing. This is how I found out about Red Circle as well. It's in the video that I'm going to link to with Pete explaining this. Red Circle is now free and unlimited, and has some awesome features, like the same sort of stuff as PodBean does. Like when I produce my podcast on PodBean, it automatically shares its different platforms, like Facebook and social media, and it sticks it on YouTube, just the audio version. It's just so easy to use. And Red Circle does exactly the same thing. Basically, the reason that they're free is I think they've got like a load of funding from Silicon Valley, and they take a cut of any profit that any podcasts make from like if you get sponsored basically through the platform, so they'll just take a cut. That's something that I haven't even talked about in the benefits as well, is like the monetary value, because I think that's what a lot of people worry about. Anyway, the second main thing that you really need, so Red Circle is by far, hands down, I'd recommend anyone to go with that. It's free, unlimited, just it makes sense. That's what I'm going to be changing to once this year of PodBing runs out. Microphone, you can just get the most bog standard microphone and it will sound better than your Mac. And I would say your laptop. I would actually say your headphones, just stick your headphones in. If you've got like a microphone, like when you can speak on the phone and stuff through like your actual headphones, that's way better than your laptop headphone, than what your microphone will be from there. So I would recommend like you can just use that. It's free, again, free. But if you want to get like that, I'll put a few recommendations and things to podcasts, to different microphones that are out there, like from the range from like $50 to $100, and you just get them on Amazon delivered like, within a couple of days. And it does make, it's not 100% necessary because of what I'm about to tell you about editing, but it does definitely add a quality to your podcast. So it's definitely worth an investment in a microphone. And I would say that's pretty much your only cost that you actually need. And then how to record the podcast. So I'm using Audacity right now, which I'm about to get to in editing. But you can also use GarageBand, however you say it, if you're on a Mac, and there's the Windows versions as well. But like just whatever you have on your computer, you can just use any of those and record it for free. If you're interviewing someone, I actually use Skype, and I just get it's called an eCam recorder, which is, it just can record the conversation between you both. It also does video as well, so you could even upload that to YouTube and things like that. And that is about, I think that was $40 when I got it. I don't know if it has changed. And it's a one-time lifetime fee. So that is just a one-time fee. But there are other ones as well, and I have links to all of this in the show notes. Then the software to actually edit and arrange the podcast, 100% use Audacity. It's just free and it's so good. Like what I'll do at the end of this is I just find a bit where I haven't been talking for, and I just select that one bit, select the rest of it, and it's called like noise reduction. And sometimes you can just hear like this shh in the background. That it just gets rid of that. And that's pretty much the main thing you need to do. If I'm doing a solo episode like this, I don't even need to like level out the sound or anything like that. But if you're speaking with someone else, sometimes, I don't know if you ever listen to a podcast, you probably even listen to some of mine maybe where this has happened, and one person speaking really, really loud and the other one's like really, really quiet. And you're like, it's hard to get the balance. But there is another free tool called Levelater, which I personally use, and it just I literally just drag the file into there and it balances out the loudness and everything. Again, completely free. There is another one as well called phonic, and that does some really cool things as well. Again, I think you get like 2 hours for free each month, but you can like buy a certain amount, which just tops up if you need any more than that. But it does some really cool things. Like if you put music and then you talk, it will fade in and fade out. So listen to the start of this episode. The end of this episode won't actually work like that. But if you listen to the start of this episode, I used it. I don't always use it, and I probably should, because it is actually much better. I just find it takes a bit longer. Like it takes a while to actually download, and you only get the 2 hours each month. And I usually have 4 or 5 hours each month. So that's just something. But like I say, I just use Levelater. I've always been a big believer, like your content is way more important than those like tiny little nitty gritty things. Like just get stuff out there. It's my personal motto. And like, if it's good content, people are going to like it no matter what the quality and everything like that. So, but obviously you don't want it sounding really, really bad. That is really the main things. And like I say, I didn't even kind of get onto talking about monetizing your podcast, like you can get sponsors for your podcast, and you'll be amazed actually at how easy, maybe not the right word, how many people are willing to pay you to get like it's well, it's not free advertising, but to get advertising on your podcast. Like serious, there are a lot of small businesses. Like just say, for example, you are doing like a property one or real estate if you're in the US. There are so many like small like businesses, like small individual investors or like different types of construction companies and things like that, that would gladly pay you like $50, $100 per episode that you put out. Genuinely not even lying. I personally never started my podcast to actually make money through sponsorship, but I've actually had someone just email me and say, any chance you could put, mention us in your podcast and I'll pay you $75. And I was like, I checked them out and I was like, oh, yeah, it kind of all aligns with what I'm doing. And they didn't even want me to mention it in the actual podcast itself. It was just in the show notes. And it's absolute craziness, like how people will actually do that. If you just actually think about, if you just use one day and come up with an idea, it's not that I don't want to monetize my podcast, but I personally have never been like a huge fan of like ones where a big chunk of it they keep talking about adverts and stuff like that. So I never really wanted to do that, but I can definitely see the fact, especially if you actually find something that does really align with what you're doing and you personally really like it or like the company, then 100% it is possible to do. Like I say though, there's so many thing that a lot of people get worked up about with podcasts and like, hey, I don't really, don't want to do it because it's definitely not as easy to like track things. So things like from your website, it's so much easier you can put like tracking links and you can see where people are landing and which pages are like converting. Same with YouTube. You can do a very similar thing. Podcast is the big thing for me is I just think it's a huge trust thing. You're giving so much value away so often that you can just build trust with people. Like if you're just being completely honest, obviously if you'll just say, buy this course and do this and do that all the time, then you're probably losing trust. But that's the same with any kind of, if you're doing that on your website, it's the same thing. You don't want to just be spamming and putting affiliate links and links to things that are going to make you money. You want to be trying to give as much value as possible. And above all else, like I just enjoy it. Like it's genuinely something that I've always enjoyed. It is the one part of everything that I do where you sometimes like have those days where you're like, oh, I just can't be bothered to do this or do that or whatever. If I have a chat with someone, like a really inspiring person, and just speak to them for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, hour, whatever it is, it can give me such a like boost. And always the next day, I'm so much more productive just because I am enjoying what I'm doing. It's the same with everything in life, isn't it? If you are enjoying what you're doing. So what I've actually done as well is I've just put like a cheat sheet. If you just want to actually get all of those tools, tips, everything all in one place. So you don't just have to like listen to this. You can go to maketimeonline.com/58 and I'll send you that cheat sheet for free straight away. No strings attached. And as I mentioned earlier, Pete McPherson, who knows so much more about all of this than me, is coming on the show next week. And he's going to be talking a lot more about why he started the podcast and a little bit more like nitty gritty stuff. He's sort of like getting into the details because like there's a lot more that you can do with a podcast. I've got to say, I've always been very lazy with what I've done with my podcast. I literally just record an episode and put it out, because like I say, it's something that I personally want to do anyway. I want to have these chats with people and do these things. So like anything that comes from it is just like an additional bonus, it's not really something that I've personally been trying to like really monetize or set up in a perfect way. But like I say, Pete really knows his stuff. I'll even put a link in the show notes. So maketimeonline.com/58. That's 58. I'll put a link, Pete's video explaining the hosting, and there's even another video that he's done recently. I might even put that in there as well, just because it's amazing. Exactly how to set up your podcast in 20 minutes. It just covers everything. You can do everything that you need in 20 minutes. And I've even just had Frances Vidakovic on the podcast recently. She was, if you remember, she got 1 million page views in her first year blogging, mainly through Pinterest, from like a parenting niche and things like that. But I spoke to her on the podcast and she was interested. And this was only a few weeks ago. And she now has a podcast up and running, and she put out like 10 episodes straight away. And she's just like gone for it. It just shows how easy. It is easy to do, and it just can bring so many benefits. So I really do hope that this can help. So if you are interested, if you have any intention of ever trying, like actually starting a podcast for whatever it is that you are doing, then you can just get everything that you need for free just by going to the show notes, and it'll explain exactly what to do. So it's maketimeonline.com/58. Catch you on the next one, guys. Thanks for listening in to this episode of Make Time Online. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And please take a moment to write a review for our podcast in the App Store. Keep changing for the better, guys. Take care.